right. So are you ready to like jump into this whole world of cultural exchange and language?
Oh, yeah. Let's do it.
You know, you sent in this clip, and it's really interesting.
Hmm.
It's a conversation between two Brazilians, right?
Right.
One who spent a lot of time like growing up in the U.S.
Yeah.
and one who like learned English later.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just their experiences are just so relatable.
Yeah,
And I feel like we can learn a lot
absolutely.
from their stories.
There's so much to unpack here. You
Yeah.
know, it's fascinating how they kind of navigate between these two cultures and two languages and all of the challenges and the rewards.
Exactly. And, you know, let's start with the woman who grew up in the U.S.
Okay.
She was talking about how even though Americans were like really friendly to her,
Yeah.
it was hard to make those like deep friendships.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
the kind that she was used to in Brazil.
Hmm.
Have you ever experienced that?
I think it's pretty common when you're navigating different cultures. What's interesting here is that she really points to this difference in cultural norms.
Right.
And she's saying that Americans tend to have this like broader and more casual definition of friendship.
Oh,
You know, like think about all those big friend groups you see in like movies and TV shows.
right.
And then you contrast that with Brazilian culture, where it's a lot more emphasis on like closer knit circles and a higher level of emotional investment
Gotcha.
in those friendships.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And then she even talks about how her American friends consider themselves best friends,
Yeah.
even though they might not talk that often,
Right.
which, like, from her experience, that level of connection in Brazil usually involves, like, way more frequent contact
Yeah.
and emotional support.
Kicks
So it's almost like different wavelengths.
For sure, different wavelengths.
Yeah.
They're using the same words, but
Yeah.
different meanings.
Exactly.
And that's where this whole idea of a cultural lens comes into play.
Well, I like that.
You know, it's basically that our upbringing and our cultural background really shapes the way we see the world.
Okay.
And we often unconsciously apply our own cultural norms and expectations
Oh, yeah.
to others. And that can lead to like misunderstandings or even misinterpretations of
Oh,
social cues.
I love that cultural lens. It's
Yeah.
like we're all looking through these different filters.
Exactly.
Slightly different filters.
Yeah, and sometimes you have to adjust your focus.
Right.
To really see it from another perspective.
It's like you gotta take their glasses off and put yours on.
Yeah, exactly.
Try to see it through their eyes.
And this difference in the cultural lens is like highlighted even more by the guy in the video,
Yes.
the Brazilian guy.
The native Brazilian
Yeah.
jumps in and he's like, even I find it difficult sometimes to explain these cultural nuances to
Yeah.
people from outside my background.
Yeah.
And he gives this hilarious example of having to explain that living with cousins.
Doesn't mean that everyone in the house is male.
Right.
Like he had to actually explain that.
That's so funny.
Yeah, and it just shows you how easy it is to make assumptions
Right.
based on our own limited experiences.
It's so true. We don't even realize how ingrained our cultural norms are
Yeah.
until we encounter a different perspective.
Right, and then you're just like, oh, wait.
Yeah,
Not everyone sees it this way.
totally.
Mhm.
And speaking of like light bulb moments,
Oh, yeah.
let's move to the topic of language learning.
Okay.
The woman in the clip, despite growing up in the U.S.,
Yeah.
actually became incredibly fluent
It's amazing.
in Portuguese.
Right?
And it wasn't just like conversational fluency. She became like a total grammar nerd.
She was correcting him.
Yeah, correcting the guy.
It's a native speaker.
A native speaker.
Yeah.
I mean, that's got to be a fun dynamic,
That must have been fun.
you know?
It's a testament to her dedication
Yeah.
to the language.
Totally. And it speaks to this larger point about language acquisition.
Mm.
It's not always about like where you're from
Right.
or how you were exposed to a language.
Right.
Sometimes it's just like sheer passion
It's true.
and a desire to connect
Yeah.
deeply
With another culture.
with another culture.
that fuels the learning process.
Totally. And her story reminds us that like becoming fluent doesn't always mean sounding like a native speaker.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Sometimes it's about achieving a level of mastery
Right.
that allows you to fully express yourself
Exactly.
and engage with the nuances of the language.
It's about communication,
Yeah.
connection,
Yeah.
not perfection.
Even if you have an accent.
Right.
Have you ever had an experience like that?
Oh, tons of times.
Really?
I think it's inspiring to see someone not only embrace another language, but also master it to the point of playfully correcting a native speaker.
Right.
That must have been a fun dynamic.
It must have been.
It really highlights the fact that proficiency in a language isn't always about where you're from, but the dedication and effort you put into it.
Totally. Okay, so now let's talk about the guy's experience.
Okay.
Learning English.
Right.
And, like, unlike the woman, for him, it was more out of necessity
Yeah, that's a great point.
than choice.
He was living in Brazil,
Yeah.
but he had to learn English to navigate an increasingly globalized world.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about textbooks and grammar rules for him.
Right?
It was about connecting with a wider community and accessing opportunities.
And he got really resourceful, too.
He did.
He was using tools like Netflix with English subtitles.
That's awesome.
And even picking up phrases from friends.
Yeah, I love that.
It reminds me of like how I used to learn slang from my favorite TV shows growing up.
It's amazing how much you can absorb
Yeah.
when you're genuinely interested in something.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah. And his experience just highlights the power of immersion
Yes.
and real-world practice.
Yeah, for sure.
He even mentions that when he taught English, his most successful students were the ones who had like a genuine passion
Yeah.
for the language
Yeah.
and used it actively in their lives.
Right.
It wasn't enough to just like memorize vocabulary lists.
Exactly. It's got to be real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They had to want to communicate
Yeah, they had to want to connect.
and connect.
For sure.
And it's that social necessity
Yes.
he talks about.
That need to use the language
Yeah.
in real life situations,
Yeah.
that really pushes you to improve.
And this brings us back to the woman
Okay.
and her experience returning to the U.S.
Yes, it's interesting how she mentions people assuming she was American
Right.
simply because of her accent,
Yeah.
even though she had this deep connection to Brazil
Totally.
that they couldn't see.
Yeah.
It raises an important question about how we perceive identity.
Yeah. It makes you realize that language is just one piece of the puzzle
Right.
when it comes to understanding someone's cultural background.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Like
no,
so multifaceted,
Yeah.
you know?
Sometimes those deeper layers are just hidden beneath the surface,
They are
waiting to be discovered.
like little treasures.
Yeah.
Just waiting to be unearthed. Yeah, it's a good reminder that we shouldn't just like assume things about people
Right.
based on how they sound.
Right.
There's always more to the story.
Yeah, and that brings us back to that question they asked at the end of the clip
Oh, yeah.
about what are some common American perceptions
Of Brazil.
of Brazil.
Yeah,
It's such a thought-provoking question.
it is.
It really made me think about my own preconceived notions.
It's a great opportunity to like examine those assumptions. And maybe challenge them a little bit.
Yeah, have your perceptions of Brazil shifted at all
Oh, for sure.
after hearing this?
Absolutely.
Yeah, mine too. I think I definitely fell into some of those common traps.
Like what?
You know, like picturing beaches and carnivals,
Right.
but not really thinking about like the day-to-day.
The real people.
Yeah, the real people.
The real lives.
The experiences of Brazilians.
Yeah, it's like we're reducing an entire culture to just a few tourist attractions,
Exactly.
which isn't fair.
So, like, what are some other perceptions?
Well, one that comes up a lot is this idea of Brazilians being incredibly warm and welcoming,
Okay. Yeah.
which, you know, a lot of times is true,
Right.
but it's important to remember that every culture has like a whole spectrum of personalities.
Right.
You can't just generalize.
Right. It's like saying everyone from a certain region loves spicy food
Yeah, exactly.
just because it's popular there.
Exactly.
Right. Individual preferences always play a role.
Always.
Yeah.
Another common perception is about language.
Okay.
Some people might assume that because Portuguese is the official language, that everyone speaks it the same way.
Oh, right.
But in reality, there are tons of regional variations and accents,
Oh, that's a great point.
just like there are in the U.S. with English.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Language is constantly evolving.
Right. It's alive.
Yeah, and adapting.
Yeah, within those different communities.
And it's important to appreciate that diversity
For sure.
and not try to like homogenize it.
Yeah.
And then there's also those perceptions about economics.
Right.
Some Americans might view Brazil as like a developing nation
Yeah.
with challenges related to poverty and inequality.
Mm-hmm.
And while those issues are definitely real and important.
Yeah, they're important to acknowledge,
Yeah.
but it's also crucial to acknowledge the progress
Right.
that the country has made
Yeah.
and the resilience of the people.
It's about like finding that balance,
It is finding that balance.
recognizing the challenges, but also celebrating the achievements
Absolute.
and just appreciating the complexities
The nuances. Yeah.
of a nation and its people.
And that brings us back to like the importance of critical thinking
Yes.
and continuous learning.
Right.
It's about being curious.
Yes.
Seeking out diverse perspectives
Mhm.
and constantly questioning those assumptions.
Those easy assumptions.
Yeah, that we might make.
It's so easy to just like fall back on what we think we know. Right. It's about recognizing that perceptions are just that.
They're perceptions, not truths.
Yeah, they're fluid and ever-changing
Mm-hmm.
and shaped by our experiences
Absolutely.
and the information that we choose to engage with.
And by having these conversations,
Yeah,
we're creating space for new understanding and deeper connections
right.
across cultures.
So I'm curious, as we wrap up this part,
Yeah.
what stands out to you the most about this conversation?
Honestly, it's the realization that even simple things like friendship and language can be viewed through such different lenses.
Totally.
It makes me want to be more mindful of my own assumptions.
Yeah.
And approach every interaction with curiosity and an open mind.
I love that it's all about embracing those aha moments
It is.
and letting them shape our understanding.
Our understanding of the world around us.
Yeah. It's interesting, thinking back to the woman's story when she returned to the U.S.
Yeah.
People just assumed she was American, right?
Right.
Because of how she spoke.
Mhm.
But they didn't really get, the depth of her connection to Brazil.
No, they didn't. And it's a reminder that identity is so multi-layered.
Yeah,
It goes way beyond what you see or even hear.
exactly.
We tend to categorize people based on how they sound, but that's just scratching the surface.
Yeah, it really
But
is.
their background and their experiences.
It's like there are all these layers that you can't see.
Right. You can't see them.
It makes you wonder how often we make assumptions about people without even realizing it.
All the time, I'm sure.
Yeah, right? Have you ever felt like your own cultural identity has been misunderstood?
Oh, yeah. Definitely happens.
Yeah.
Especially in a world that tries to, put everyone in a box.
Right.
It's a good reminder to approach everyone with curiosity.
Yeah.
And a willingness to listen to their story.
So their unique story.
Yeah, instead of relying on those preconceived notions
And that leads us back to that final question they asked in the clip.
about perceptions of Brazil.
Yeah, what are those common American perceptions of Brazil?
It's a good question.
And it's they're challenging us to really think about our own biases,
I think so.
and go beyond those stereotypes.
Absolutely. It's about looking deeper.
Yeah.
Recognizing that Brazil is so much more than just beaches and carnivals.
Right. It's a country with such a rich history and culture.
Exactly. A blend of indigenous, African, and European influences.
Yeah. And of people who are just as diverse as the landscapes they live in.
It's fascinating.
It is. And that's what makes these deep dives so great.
I agree.
It's not just about learning facts.
No, it's about broadening our horizons,
Yeah.
challenging our perspectives, and embracing those aha moments that help us understand humanity a little bit better.
This conversation really reminds us that language is more than just words.
It is. It's a bridge
Yeah.
to different cultures and perspectives.
So think about it.
Yeah.
How do your experiences with language and culture shape the way you see the world?
It's a good question.
And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us
Thanks for being here.
on this exploration.
Absolutely.
We hope you've learned something new
And we've inspired you to keep exploring the world.
with open minds and hearts.
Yes.
So until next time, keep diving deep.